Britney Spears wasn't a world-famous pop star. For 13 years, she was America's most famous prisoner. When Oprah spoke with her, she felt like she was watching someone's first day out of prison, and that moment brought tears to everyone's eyes. The studio lights felt different that afternoon, softer somehow, as if even the harsh reality of television understood that something sacred was about to unfold. Oprah had interviewed thousands of guests over 4 decades. Presidents who shaped nations, survivors who defied death, icons who changed culture. But she had never prepared for a conversation quite like this one. How do you speak to someone who had been silenced for so long that her own voice had become a stranger to her? In the hours before filming, Oprah had done something she rarely did. She sat in complete silence, understanding that sometimes the most important conversations require not just words, but the space between them. She knew that this interview wouldn't just be about entertainment. It would be about witnessing the rebirth of a human spirit. Britney walked onto the stage with the careful steps of someone learning to trust solid ground again. Her movements carried the weight of 13 years. 13 years of having every decision, every dollar, every breath monitored and controlled. The audience fell silent, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Some wiped away tears before a single word had been spoken, recognizing the profound courage it took just for her to be there. The usual pre-interview chatter was absent. Makeup artists had worked in reverent silence, understanding they were preparing someone for more than television. They were witnessing a woman preparing to reclaim her narrative. Even the lighting crew had adjusted their setup intuitively, creating an atmosphere of sanctuary rather than spectacle. "You know," Oprah began, her voice gentler than usual, "when I was preparing for today, I kept thinking about what freedom means. We use that word so easily, but sitting here with you, I realize I've never truly understood its weight." Britney's eyes filled immediately, not with the polished tears of a performer, but with the raw emotion of someone hearing their truth acknowledged for the first time. "I forgot what my own voice sounded like," she whispered. "For 13 years, every word I spoke had to be approved. Even good morning felt dangerous. I would practice conversations in my head, rehearsing what I might be allowed to say, editing myself before I even opened my mouth. Do you know what it's like to become a stranger to yourself?" The silence that followed was profound. Camera operators, who had filmed countless emotional moments, found themselves struggling to maintain their professional composure. This wasn't entertainment, this was resurrection. Even the sound technicians, hidden behind their equipment, found themselves holding their breath, afraid that any movement might shatter this moment of raw truth. Oprah leaned forward, abandoning every interview technique she had ever learned. This wasn't the time for clever questions or strategic pauses. This was a moment for pure human connection. "Tell me about the day you realized you weren't free." What followed wasn't just an answer, it was an excavation of buried truth, each word carefully chosen like someone defusing a bomb made of their own pain. "It wasn't one day," Britney replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It was 1,000 small moments. The day I couldn't choose what to eat for breakfast. The day I needed permission to hug my own children. The day I realized I had become a ghost in my own life. The day I looked in the mirror and saw a puppet instead of a person." She paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that had seen too much but somehow still held hope. "I performed for millions, while feeling invisible. I made everyone else rich while being denied access to my own money. I was the prisoner who sang her own chains into gold. And the cruelest part, the world applauded my captivity because it sounded beautiful." The studio fell into a hush, so complete that the only sound was the soft hum of cameras capturing history. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Oprah's next question came from a place of deep intuition. "Britney, what did you dream about during those years?" The answer that followed would haunt everyone who heard it. "I dreamed about being ordinary," Britney said, tears streaming down her face. "I dreamed about going to a grocery store without asking permission. I dreamed about crying in private. I dreamed about silence that belonged to me. I dreamed about having a bad day and not having it analyzed by committees of people who profited from my pain." She paused, her breath catching. "Do you know what it's like to dream about normalcy when you're living in what everyone else calls a fantasy? To want nothing more than the right to be unremarkable for just one day?" The studio audience was openly weeping now. Even the production assistants, hardened by years in television, were wiping their eyes. This wasn't just Britney's story. It was every woman's fear of losing herself, magnified under the brightest lights in the world. It was every person's terror of becoming a stranger in their own life. I remember the exact moment I realized I had to fight back. Britney continued, her voice now carrying a strength that seemed to surprise even her. It was when they told me I couldn't drive my car to see my son. Not because I was unsafe, but because someone else had decided I couldn't be trusted with that choice. I sat in my driveway for 2 hours, keys in my hand, realizing that even this simple act of motherhood required permission from strangers. That's when I understood this wasn't protection. This was ownership. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage from some internal reservoir she'd forgotten existed. I realized that I had two choices: die slowly while appearing to live, or risk everything to remember what living actually felt like. Oprah felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of a truth so fundamental it changed the very air in the room. What gave you the courage to speak up? The silence was killing me, Britney replied simply. I realized that being destroyed while fighting for yourself is better than being preserved while belonging to someone else. I understood that I had to choose between dying as myself or surviving as someone else's creation. The weight of those words settled over everyone present. Here was a woman who had been one of the most recognizable faces on the planet, explaining what it meant to be invisible in plain sight. People saw me on stage and thought I was free, Britney continued. But freedom isn't about how loudly you can sing or how bright the lights are. Freedom is about being able to say no to the lights entirely. Every night I performed liberation while living in captivity. I danced joy while drowning in despair. The audience saw artistry. I felt like a trained animal performing for treats I'd never received. She looked down at her hands, then back up with startling clarity. They turned my talent into my trap. The very thing that had made me feel most alive became the instrument of my imprisonment. Oprah nodded, understanding flooding her face. You were performing your own imprisonment. Exactly, Britney said, a sad smile crossing her lips. Every song became a cry for help that sounded like a celebration. Every dance move was choreographed compliance. I was the most famous woman in the world, and I couldn't even choose my own bedtime. The conversation took an even more profound turn when Oprah asked about healing. How do you learn to trust your own voice again? Britney was quiet for a long moment, considering. You start small, she said finally. The first day I was free, I stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes, just choosing what to have for lunch. Not because I was hungry, but because choice by choice, breath by breath, you remember who you are underneath all the decisions other people made for you. I had to learn to trust my own instincts again, to believe that my wants and needs were valid. She paused, her eyes growing distant with memory. I remember the first time I said no to something after the conservatorship ended. It was something small, someone asking me to sign an autograph when I was exhausted. But when I said no and the world didn't end, when nobody punished me for having a boundary, that's when I realized freedom wasn't just legal papers. It was permission to be human. She looked directly at Oprah, woman to woman, survivor to survivor. You know what the hardest part was? Not the control, not the money, not even the loneliness. It was watching everyone else live their lives while mine was on permanent pause. Watching people complain about choices I would have given anything to make. Seeing other mothers kiss their children goodnight without needing approval from a judge. Her voice grew quieter, more intimate. I used to watch strangers in coffee shops and feel envious. Not of their anonymity, but of their autonomy. They could order whatever they wanted, sit wherever they chose, leave when they felt like it. Simple human freedoms that had become impossible luxuries for me. The audience was completely still now, hanging on every word. This wasn't celebrity confession. This was human revelation in its purest form. But here's what I learned, Britney said, her voice gaining power. Prison doesn't have to be a place with bars. It can be a contract, a relationship, a voice in your head telling you that you're not capable of your own life. And freedom doesn't mean never being afraid. Freedom means being afraid and choosing anyway. It means understanding that your voice matters, even when it shakes. She leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera, as if addressing a friend. For anyone watching who feels trapped, whether by circumstances, by other people, or by the fear of their own power, I want you to know that small acts of rebellion count. Choosing what to eat, what to wear, what to think. These aren't trivial things. They're the building blocks of a free life. Oprah felt tears she hadn't expected streaming down her own face. In 40 years of conversations, she had never witnessed someone so completely embody the journey from captivity to liberation. "What would you say to the Britney who was trapped?" Oprah asked softly. "I would say your voice matters even when they tell you it doesn't. Your choices matter even when they're taken away. And your freedom is coming, even when it feels impossible." Britney paused, looking directly into the camera. "And to anyone watching who feels trapped, whether it's by circumstance, by other people, or by their own fear, your story isn't over. You are not your prison. You are not the limitations others place on you. You are not the voice in your head that says you're not enough." She took a breath, her words becoming a gentle but powerful manifesto. Start with one small choice today. Choose what you eat for breakfast. Choose what song you listen to. Choose to believe that you deserve better. Freedom isn't a destination, it's a practice. And every small choice is a step toward the person you were meant to be. The final moment of the interview came when Oprah asked what freedom sounded like. Britney smiled, the first genuinely joyful expression of the entire conversation. "Freedom sounds like quiet," she said. "Not the quiet of being silenced, but the quiet of choice. The quiet of being able to speak or not speak, to sing or not sing, to be seen or not be seen. Freedom sounds like my own voice saying yes or no and knowing that both answers are mine." She paused, her smile growing more radiant. "But you know what freedom really sounds like? It sounds like hearing your own thoughts without permission. It sounds like laughter that nobody has to approve. It sounds like the beautiful, messy, imperfect noise of a human being living her own life, making her own mistakes, and celebrating her own victories, no matter how small they might seem to the outside world." As the cameras stopped rolling, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio, audience, crew, production staff, rose in spontaneous applause. Not for a performance, but for a human being who had found her way home to herself. Several audience members approached Britney afterward, not for autographs or selfies, but to quietly thank her for giving them permission to examine their own lives. One woman whispered, "You helped me realize I've been living in a prison of my own making." Another simply said, "Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like." Oprah later described that interview as the most important conversation of her career. Not because of its entertainment value, but because it reminded everyone present that freedom is not a given. It's a daily choice, a precious gift that can be lost and, with tremendous courage, reclaimed. "I've interviewed world leaders and Nobel Prize winners," Oprah would later reflect, "but I've never met anyone who taught me more about the human spirit than Britney did that day." Britney Spears had entered that studio as America's most famous former prisoner. She left as something far more powerful. A woman who had learned that the strongest bars are often invisible, and the most important key is always the one you find within yourself. In the weeks that followed, the interview sparked conversations in living rooms across America and around the world. People began examining their own lives, asking themselves, what prison have I built around my own dreams? What choices have I surrendered? What voice have I silenced? Mental health professionals reported increases in people seeking therapy, not for crisis intervention, but for reclaiming their autonomy. The phrase "permission to be human" became a rallying cry for those learning to trust their own judgment again. Because sometimes the most profound gift one person can give another is permission to remember who they were before the world told them who they should be. And on that afternoon in that studio, Britney Spears gave that gift to millions. The reminder that freedom is always possible, one choice at a time. The girl who had been controlled for 13 years had become the woman who reminded us all that our voices, our choices, and our freedom are ours to claim. And in the end, that might be the most beautiful song she ever sang. Not with her voice, but with her life, proving that sometimes the most powerful music comes from the courage to break free from the stage that was never truly yours.